Oh, sorry, what was your first name? Did I just call you
William.
Dr. Nelson?
William, yeah.
William. Okay. Well, Dr. Nelson, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Well, thank you, Arlena. Nice to be here.
I had so much fun in your podcast. We were just on a roll, and your producer was like, "We have to stop."
Oh, I know. Robin's like, you guys, did she cut in? You guys got to stop because she's used to that. So,
yeah, no, we were having such a great conversation. And so do you want to just sort of give a little background on the type of work you do, the kind of, facility that you work with, and sort of who your ideal clients are?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Dr. William Nelson. I'm a naturopathic medical doctor. I've been in practice almost 25 years. And I have a few specialties, one of which is addiction. And the other thing that I do that ties in pretty closely is what I call regenerative orthopedics. So that's where I do non-surgical injections to knees, hips, shoulders, low back to help people either from acute or chronic injury, motor vehicle accidents. And so that's a big part. And because a lot of those people, if they're not treated well, they can end up on opiates. And so that's what happened to my daughter. And that was my entree into addiction medicine, because I'd been practicing for a long time and I had treated people that had alcohol use disorder. I don't think I ever treated anybody for opiate or heroin addiction. But our daughter, right when I met Stephanie, is my wife, we were both on our second go around in marriage. And right when I decided that I was falling in love, and we both at her birthday party learned that her daughter was a heroin addict. And, it's that first part of the relationship. And I was like, oh, I wasn't quite sure about what I wanted to do. And I just told her, I really care for you and I can see a future together. But man, oh man, I don't know if I'm up to dealing with the challenges of addiction, because I know that it just pulls everybody in like a dark hole or like a black hole. It's like it's a vortex of energy. Just anybody surrounding the family circle and the satellite family, or the nuclear and the extended family, just gets drawn in. I had 2 young children, and I was imagining that at some point that we may move in together, but I didn't want my kids to be involved with someone that was having those things because of all the challenges, the lying and the stealing and just the chaos that occurs. And so that was my introduction to trying to help. And I felt very, very frustrated because our daughter, Lauren, she was lost. She was an IV heroin user, weighing about 100 pounds. And she would spend pretty much 24/7 figuring out, how to gain access to a vein that had all been blown. So she would take 2 hours to get a vein to inject. And then the rest of the time was spent how to scrounge up money, lie, cheat, steal, or do whatever to get the money to afford her habit. And as a doctor and as a naturopath, I was so frustrated for 2 reasons. One, this is, probably we weren't married yet, but I still didn't feel like she was my child, but I thought that Stephanie are probably going to eventually be a family. And so frustrating that I couldn't help this kid. And then also just as a doctor, feeling like I don't have useful tools to help people that are lost in this way. And so simultaneously, she got to the point where she was really finally ready. And you had mentioned that you were hoping to speak to parents of addicted loved ones, or spouses who have a problem with addiction and use disorders. And, my advice is that you cannot work the addiction on your time. If you want to help, if you want to somehow participate, it has to be on their time, which often doesn't coincide. And
that's actually a really good point, because people, I think, the family members are like, I'm ready. Let's, I've aligned these resources for you. Let's take advantage of it now. And you're right. I didn't even realize that that is all about your timeline, not their timeline.
Yeah. And it's all with the best of intention, because you
Sure.
love these people and you want to help. And then there's a fine line between helping and enabling. So there's is a fine line, and it's a nuanced, very challenging situation. And I know for parents working with addicted loved ones, their normal, very astute and very successful parenting style goes out the window when it comes to addiction. And you have to just look at it in a fresh and new way. And if you're not working with a coach, you need to, because the parents need to be coached and they need to change. Usually the changes that they make and how they're interacting with their addicted loved one, their change in their education is probably 6 months to a year ahead of the addict.
Wow, 6 months to a year.
Yeah. And as I mentioned this, there's a great resource. My mentor and the person that I've learned the most about this challenging dynamic, his name's Mike Speakman. And he wrote a book called The 4 Seasons of Recovery. And he also started a group called palgroup.org. And that is entirely geared towards teaching the parents of addicted loved ones, or also spouses of addicted loved ones, on how you got to change your game plan and the changes you need to make. And that's where that statistic and his experience has come from. He says it's at least 6 months, and it's probably a year, where you start changing how you're interacting with that child or spouse, and you start setting boundaries, you start holding them to those boundaries, and it will require the addicted loved one to change, because if you're offering any sort of support financially, a home, cell phone, car, gas, food, and you make it clear of how you're going to help them and what you require in order to agree and continue to help, it will change the dynamic. And
So boundaries is one of the ways to help
absolutely.
the person. And so, boundaries in my mind, I teach boundaries about, state a hardship and ask for a need, in the turn, like when you're dealing with somebody in a relationship, it's like hard for me to watch you go through this. What I need is, for you to show like some willingness. Like, what's an example of setting a boundary with somebody? Like,
Well,
did you have to, like, maybe you could tell me how you set boundaries with
here,
Lauren?
there's so many different things that you can establish, and it depends upon what kind of resources is your addicted child or your addicted loved one. What kind of resources are they receiving from you? So if
Resources.
you're paying their bills or providing them a room in your home to live, your boundaries would be a lot different than if that person is self-sufficient. They're not asking for money. They're not drawing on your resources, either your time or energy or money or finances or housing. Then you're probably less able to establish those particular type of boundaries. But like with our daughter, Stephanie, she told Lauren, she said, listen, I love you and I would do anything to help you, but while you're using, you cannot be in my house. And in one time in particular, I remember Lauren came late at night and wanted to sleep in the house. And she said, no, you're not allowed to sleep in the house when you're using. You can sleep in the driveway in your car. And that's a hard thing to do for a parent.
I can't imagine how hard that must have been for
Yeah.
her. How did she know to do that?
From this PALS group.
Oh, okay.
And I will credit the PAL group to the reason why our daughter is still alive.
Oh my
It
God.
got to a point where Lauren was lost. She had about an 8 gram a day IV heroin habit, and she weighs
Wow.
100 pounds.
Oh my
So
God.
the amount of heroin that she used is more than any other patient that I've ever seen in the last 8 years, not including 250-pound, 300-pound people. They weren't using 8 grams of heroin a day.
So that's just meant that I don't know a lot about heroin. That just meant that she had built up such a tolerance that she was using, did you say an eighth of a gram?
No, 8 grams.
8 grams. Holy
8.0,
crap.
8.0 grams. And I'll have 250, 300 pound guys who go, I'll ask them, I'm not seeing as much heroin now as I was because now it's all fentanyl primarily.
Are you so the opioids isn't like Oxycontin? That's not
You
as
you can't really get OxyContin anymore.
oh,
You
because
know,
it was
it's so expensive,
mm,
and now there's such a clampdown on doctors, so
good.
people are not really getting it like they used to, because a lot of doctors are subject to, losing their license. We know doctors that have lost their license. These are good
Yeah.
doctors, pain med doctors, who um, were the last place that people would send their most difficult patients. Said, I can't deal with this patient. They have such a challenging pain. They need a pain med doctor. And so all the physicians in town would send to particular doctors. And some of these guys got in trouble and lost their license just because of the stringent requirements and how it went from pain being a fourth vital sign. Back 20 years ago, pain was a vital sign, including, the vital signs would be respiration rate, heart rate, your pulse, and your temp. And then they would include another one, pain. And if you didn't address the pain, people were subject to reprimand from their medical board. And it went from that. And then after the opiate crisis got so horrible, they make it so you cannot prescribe long-term. They put a lot more restrictions. And now it's very difficult for people on the street to get opioids. So now,
So they're turning to heroin.
because of that, initially what happened when that slowed down, suddenly you saw a huge spike in the use of heroin. And that's what happened when our daughter, Lauren, was really heavily involved in drug use. And luckily for her, that fentanyl wasn't readily available at that time, or I'm sure she would be dead.
Yeah, that's brutal. So did you say that she got addicted because she had an injury of some
Yeah,
kind and
yeah,
she was prescribed?
she was on a moped and got hit by a car and thrown 40 feet in the air. And then she was young, and I love this kid. She's so amazing. And I'll talk about, it's a good story. She's one of the few that made it through this, and she's 7 years sober.
Oh my God, that is so great to
Yeah,
hear.
she beat the odds. But
yeah, she did.
really what happened is she got hit, thrown, and had crazy pain. And right at a time in her life where Lauren is about experience. When she plays music, she plays it loud. And when she experiences life, she wants to experience to the fullest. Stephanie and I are rock climbers. Most people, when we take people rock climbing and they're coming down on a rope and being lowered down, they're petrified. Our daughter, when she's coming down on a rope, she's like, swing me, William. And she wants me to spin her around, coming down, hanging on a rope. So she loves,
fearless.
She's fearless, and she's adrenaline person.
An adrenaline junkie.
And so that's a part of the endorphins and all of the stuff that she received as a benefit from her heroin.
That is crazy. Okay, so she has the moped accident. She gets prescribed pain meds, and then is she like instantly hooked?
Yeah, she got a 30-day supply of Percocet, and she gobbled them up in less than a week.
Oh
And
my
so,
God. How old was she at the time?
probably late teens or maybe early 20s. That was before
so young.
I knew these guys. I didn't know Lauren, and I hadn't yet met Stephanie.
Okay, so she was already in full-blown addiction.
Oh,
You guys found out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We found out, Steph and I found out the same day.
At the party. That is crazy. I mean, what possessed you to continue this relationship with a woman?
Because you can't
Doctor, you're so
help it.
codependent.
You can't help who you love.
I know, we
And
love who we love.
I was, my story is that I had a marriage. I was married for 17 years, and just the dissolution of my marriage and my kids, and I was just devoted to my kids. I was devoted to my practice, and I loved to do my stuff, rock climb, golf, do my thing. And when I met Stephanie, very short in our conversation, I'd said, this may be premature, but in case you're wanting to get married, I'm not really interested in marriage. I just want to, I kind of just want to date and have someone in my life, but I'm not really thinking I'm up for marriage. And she said, oh, me neither. And then about a month into it, I was like, damn, I'm falling head over heels for this woman.
Oh,
and that was right at the time that we found out that Lauren was a heroin addict. That's Stephanie's birthday.
How did you find out?
Well, we were at a restaurant and our whole family was there. Her brother, her sister-in-law, her 2 kids, my 2 kids, and Steph and I, and then 2 nephews. There were like 10 people. And Lauren and her sister went to the bathroom and they were in there for an hour. The meal came, everybody ate, and they still hadn't come out. And when they came out, we were like, what in the world? And Haley, her sister, said, we got to talk. And so they shared the information about what Lauren was dealing with and kind of came clean about her addiction. And we were both devastated. And I was just like, I knew it. I knew there was something that it seemed too perfect, this relationship and my new love of my life, that I was, going, oh, I'm in love. And I didn't think I'd open my heart again. And so that felt good. And then I was like, Stephanie, I don't think I'm ready for this. I don't think I'm ready to be involved.
And how long have you been married now?
5 years.
Nice.
Yeah.
And here we are, and everybody is safe and healthy.
So
you've been married for 5 years, but Lauren's been sober for 7. So it sounds like
coming up 7. Yeah.
So it sounds like there was a courtship period of a couple years.
Yeah. And this is during the time when Lauren was going through the throes of her addiction.
Oh my gosh.
Just a number of detox and rehab and short terms of sobriety, followed by a predictable relapse. The longest time she was ever sober was about 60 days. And she had been to inpatient detox centers, world renowned, best place in the planet for addiction recovery, and the minimally competent places. But it didn't matter because, as I was alluding to earlier, she wasn't ready.
She wasn't ready.
And for those of you that want to hear Lauren's story, I interviewed her a couple of times on my podcast. And one of the things floored me is during our interview, this is the first time I've heard this. And she made it clear to me. She said, William, when I went to Hazleton and when I went to some of these other inpatient recovery centers, I didn't want to get sober. I'm like, well, we kept celebrating. Oh, it's finally it. Remember, it's our time, not her time. We were ready for her to be sober, but she was not. And I'm like, well, Lauren, why would you agree to go into these detox centers and detox and rehab? She goes, because my habit was too expensive. I wanted to decrease my tolerance so I could go out and get high with less heroin. And she told me that, and my jaw hit the ground.
Pissed for you.
In the middle of our podcast. And I was like, we are so oblivious. We kept celebrating. Finally, this is it. She's finally going to do it. She's finally ready. She's finally going to get sober. And we as a family are going to be able to move on in our life. But she wasn't ready.
She wasn't ready.
So
I'm going to ask you not to touch your desk.
Oh, sorry. I'm Danish. I'm Danish. Use my hands.
I get it. Mexican. Okay, well, that's crazy. So she, was in the throes of her manipulation, and you guys were just wanting her to get sober. I can speak from a little bit of experiences when, I found out my 17-year-old had been smoking weed. And when we found out, I was terrified because of my own addiction behavior. Listen, I had not held a bag of weed for over 26 years. And I was like, I realized that my inner drug addict was alive and well. And it was terrifying. We made him put everything down the sink and all that. And there was the period of time where I was like on pins and needles. I didn't know what we were dealing with. Right. But that's a lot different than heroin, because from my experience with heroin, it is very difficult to quit.
Oh, any addiction is difficult, but heroin has a double-edged sword, I
Yeah.
think, is,
There's an ugliness about
yeah, you know,
heroin.
well, it's funny because it is so difficult to quit any addiction, but heroin is doubly so because
Yeah.
in most types of addictions, when you stop using, you'll feel better pretty quickly.
Right.
Heroin, you feel way worse for sometimes extended periods. And you have a post-acute withdrawal syndrome with
Yeah.
heroin that I think is more challenging. It negatively affects your neurotransmitters,
Right.
your endocrine system, your adrenals are shot, your lethargy, you have no energy. And this is after the acute. A lot of people think the acute is so difficult because that feels like you're going to die.
Right.
You throw up, you have diarrhea, you have bone pain, you have feels like you have insects crawling on your skin, you can't sleep, you're on edge, you have muscle cramps, then you get chills and fever. It's like COVID. You feel like you have a COVID flu, but probably worse.
Yeah. Is there somebody in the room with you?
Hey, Steph, we can hear that. We're trying to do the podcast.
It's very professional over here. Sorry, I didn't interrupt you. Yeah, no. So the centers that you sent, how many did she go through?
We've tried to count, and I think it's 8, 9 times.
So
Different centers. So
you
she
guys
went
have
to
been through a lot.
Hazleton, that was in Oregon. And the most that she attended was Calvary in Phoenix, and she actually works there right now. She's working
Oh,
at
does she work
Calvary.
there? Was that the last one she went to?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And she was just, so as a family member, looking back in hindsight at her, yeah, I mean, that's a lot of, I would imagine that cost a lot of money to send her to 8 different places. And not everybody is a doctor and can afford to send their kids.
We spent a lot of Stephanie's retirement funds.
Yeah, to save her life. And you have a happy ending story, which is
Yeah,
amazing. And I think that's one of the things I wanted to accomplish with, some of these podcasts where we're talking to the family members, is to give them hope that it's
yeah.
possible. And
It's
you guys
possible.
just went through the ringer. What kind of support did you really need during that time? Like, if you had to do it over again, what kind of support would you have sought out?
The thing that I think we would have liked to start earlier is to get involved with this pal group.
Okay.
It's the best. And get this book. I'll send you the details on the book
Okay.
by Michael Speakman. And basically, if you're trying to solve a problem of an addicted loved one without some really good coaching and really good info, you are going to be at a loss because, as I
Okay.
mentioned earlier, the key parental characteristics that usually kind of indicate good parenting goes out the window when it comes to addiction. And
Right.
all of
All
you
the rules are
think,
different, right?
yeah, you feel like, oh, I got to do this. No, no, no. And a lot of it has to do with, worrying about what's going to happen. But the main thing is you as a parent, as a loved one with these kids or a spouse, you have to work on yourself, because part of your
Mm.
challenge is that you think that you can help them, and which so easily turns into enabling.
That I think is so key. And I wrote down helping versus enabling. Do you have,
Yeah,
and I think it's so important to have like specific examples. Like,
yeah.
can you sort
Well,
of give,
I can give example.
yeah,
So Lauren would every once in a while call her mother and say, "Mom, I need some money." And they're so good at pulling on your heartstrings.
I know,
"Mom, I
God,
need
so
money.
I'm hungry.
I don't have anything to eat." And they're just, that she knows her mom, and her mom would do anything for her. But
Mhm.
after we were trained and said, you cannot, as
No
hard as it
money,
is, you just do not give them any money.
no
And then,
money.
and
Okay.
then Stephanie would say, well, I'll go to the grocery store and buy you food. And then sometimes I think she would sell her food to people to buy drugs.
Yeah.
And she would put gas in her car. And then people were like, Stephanie, you can't put gas in her car because she's gonna have to drive. She's driving around. So the money that you gave her for gas, that's money she didn't have to spend for gas. And guess where that's going? That's buying drugs. So it's no financial support whatsoever.
No money.
And now here's the thing that Lauren explained to me, kind of on the other side of what support means, is that she said, Mom, one thing that you did, you never gave up on me.
Oh,
I'm getting choked up now.
oh,
And
I mean, oh,
she said, Mom, you never gave up on me. I knew you always loved me unconditionally, even though my life was a mess. And some people say, until you're sober, I'm not going to communicate. I'm cutting off all ties and all communication. Lauren said, that's not, in her opinion, not a good thing to do.
okay.
Because it doesn't cost you anything. And it's not really enabling them. It's just showing them that you care. And so
Okay, so don't cut off communication.
it's important to keep those communication lines open. Now, sometimes it will be one way. When Lauren would be doing better, we would hear from her frequently, daily. And then all of a sudden she'd go AWOL and we wouldn't hear from her for 3 weeks. And we knew that she was having another challenge. So this comes at a time when it was so challenging. She was using so much, and it was kind of a turning point in her recovery, is right as Stephanie and I were going to some of these PAL group meetings and learning how to deal with our addicted loved one. Stephanie just one day came home from work, and I said, how's your day, sweetheart? And she goes, well, it's a hard day. And I said, what happened? She said, I saw Lauren and I told her goodbye. And I went, now I'm gonna.
Oh no, she said goodbye.
She goes, I have to tell you, Lauren, I would do anything to help you, but you're not ready to get sober and you are gonna die. I know you're gonna die, and I don't want you to die without me saying goodbye. So this is goodbye. I hope I'm wrong, but I think you're gonna die. And I couldn't live with myself if I let you die without me saying goodbye. And I'm here for you when you're ready, when you want to get sober and really want to do it, I'm ready. But for now, I'm saying goodbye.
But does that mean she cut off communication?
No.
Oh, she didn't come off, but she was just like, in
Because
case I don't see you again.
I can't live with the fact that you may die tonight, tomorrow, next week. We get a call from the ER that you had overdosed, and I didn't have a chance to say goodbye, and I love you.
My God.
Oh, I know. I'm still, it's 7 years. And I'm still like holding back my.
Man, we just love our kids so much. I mean.
And so luckily, there was a number of things that came around right at the same time. That was a shocker for Lauren. And then Lauren also was right at the point where she knew that she couldn't continue. She had overdosed, I think 4 or 5 times, ended up in the ER, getting a Narcan shot, which everybody listening to this podcast that has someone addicted to opiates, you have to get Narcan. You have to have it available. You have to know how to use it. Here in Arizona, we have a free resource that anybody that needs it, they can go to sonorapreventionworks.org and they can get free Narcan shots. And so those of you that don't know, Narcan is an opioid antagonist that will revive someone who is overdosed and has stopped breathing. And the heart.
You said Sonora Prevention.
Yes, sonorapreventionworks.org.
.org.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so Lauren had been in the ER 4 or 5 times. We didn't know this either. And get the Narcan shot. And they had to cardio convert her. They had to put the paddles on her because her heart stopped 3 or 4 different times.
Oh my God. How terrifying is
we
it?
Didn't know that. We didn't know that happened until after, a year after her recovery, she told us.
So does that, I just wonder, does that cause a little bit of trauma for you? Oh, even if she's safe now, does hearing about that cause trauma?
Yeah, I try not to even think about it because she's sober and she's doing well.
Right.
But
yeah.
If I were in a place where I would visualize that and feel the emotion, I don't even want to go there because I just don't want to think of the fact that our daughter in there, stopped breathing, heart stopped, and clear. and they cardio shocked her back to
It
life.
is the most dramatic
Yeah. And
experience.
she had told me, when they give you a Narcan shot, she said, I even met an ER guy that had treated her. And when you use Narcan, suddenly it kicks off all the opiates off your receptors. And so not only do you start breathing and your heart starts, but you are immediately in withdrawals, major withdrawals. And she's yelling and swearing at him, going, you ruined my effing high, you dumbass, and he's like, you could have just said, thanks for saving my life.
Wow.
So yeah,
I mean, they're crazy. And the doctors know that these people are crazy, right? They know not to take it personally, right? I hope.
yeah. So then with Lauren's story, after that interaction with her mother, it kind of was a slap in the face.
Okay.
And Lauren told me that one morning, when you're using that much heroin, or for these people now, they're mostly using fentanyl, if you don't get the drug into your system, you will start feeling really sick. So after a while, their tolerance and dependence, you increase your tolerance, and then you have to use more in order to feel anything. So most of what happens is you're just chasing the dragon. You're trying not to get sick, and getting to the point where you can feel what you want to feel. And so that's when it's so dangerous, where you can overdose. And that's what happens a lot. If you are using, don't use alone, and make sure that you have a Narcan shot, because someone out here listening, just by taking those two pieces of advice, is going to save a life, and probably more than one.
Yeah, my friend, she has a podcast. I should probably introduce you to her. It's called Courage to Change. And she was a heroin addict, and her father knew to have Narcan in the house. He let her in the house, and she had an appointment for something, and he went in to go get her, and she was in the process of ODing, and he saved her life because he had the Narcan in the house.
Yeah, it's going to
She's
happen.
like 19 years sober now.
Yeah, it's amazing. So that happened with the conversation with their mother, saying, I'm going to say goodbye. I love you. Hope I'm wrong, but I think you're going to die.
Okay, so no money, keep
money.
communication open, and the impact of her mother sort of energetically, emotionally, like mentally, like releasing her.
Yeah. And for Stephanie, she said it was horrible, and it was so difficult, but she said suddenly she was free. She goes, I couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
I couldn't have a life. I'm just meeting you. We're having our relationship. She said, my life, I couldn't do anything because I was nonstop petrified that my daughter was going to die. And so I decided to say goodbye. And she said, you're never okay with your kid dying.
No.
But in some way, she said, I was okay with it because it was the only logical, predictable outcome. If someone is using that much heroin, they're either going to be in jail or they're going to die. Lauren went to jail.
Watching you, like you watching Stephanie go through the role. I mean, she went through the ringer with
man.
Lauren, and it must have been so painful for you to watch Stephanie in so much pain.
Yeah.
And there does have to be like this acceptance or a surrender of like, I didn't cause it. I can't control it. I can't cure it. And just to release her, because that's what I see. That's what I see a lot of times in the family members, is their lives are just consumed by fear and terror and sadness. And it like takes over the whole family.
And all of those things, plus in your attempts to help, you're doing things that are not helping, they're enabling. And if it involves money, finance, a home, a car, any resource, you have to make it be painful for them to continue. A lot of these kids, I'll call them kids, some of them are 40 or 50-year-old adults living in their parents' basement without a job, living off their parents' finances still. Yeah. So I call it, you're on a drug holiday. You're on a spring break, perpetual spring break, because you have no responsibility and you're just getting high and making excuses and causing havoc. And, it's been said, if you have an addicted loved one and you want them to get well, and they still are getting high, and you have a good relationship with them, you're not helping them. You have to
That's enabling.
You have to get to the point where they're frustrated and upset with you, because now they realize that you caught on, and you're not going to continue to allow them you're not going to facilitate their addiction, leading to a predictable death or jail incarceration. So
Yeah.
Lauren, at this
How,
time, had that experience. She told me also she sat in the mirror one day and was trying to hit a vein and tried to go between her fingers, between her toes, couldn't get any of these, and eventually had to go into her vein in her neck,
oh, scary.
and spent an hour and a half or 2 hours trying to do this. And just suddenly kind of a flash in the mirror. And she's just look at yourself. How did you get here? She had blood dripping down her chest, 2 hours to try to get a vein in order to prevent from being sick, finally getting a vein, but knowing you got to repeat the whole procedure in another 3 hours.
Oh, 3 hours.
And she said, that's about how long she would take. So she would have 1 hour of feeling not sick, and then she would already start to feel the withdrawals again.
Oh, that's
And
so
then,
scary.
so she said, I just looked in the mirror and said, Lauren, how did you get here? She goes, you're miserable, your life is horrible, and you're going to die. And so she said, I want to get well, but I can't. It's impossible. I don't know how. So right at that time, I learned a technique using naltrexone, which is a similar drug, very similar to the Narcan. The Narcan is fast acting, naltrexone is long acting. It's also available in a shot called Vivitrol.
Okay.
And Revia is an oral drug that's failed miserably because it requires daily use in order for it to do its job. But I learned a technique where we would do a pellet insertion of the naltrexone in a minor surgical procedure, place this under the skin, and it prevents a person from getting high on opiates, but also, even more importantly, it takes away the cravings that make it so difficult to prevent relapse. So right at the same time, with a synergy and serendipity, she was finally ready, because of all the things that happened. And I finally found something that would help her prevent the relapse. And so Stephanie and I were ready to get on an airplane to go to see my other daughter, who's in New York City. And but we said, Lauren's sober. She just got out of Valley Hospital. She had Suboxone, which is a mild opiate, but has a long half-life. And so I told her, I said, Lauren, we need to put this pellet in. And she goes, well, what's it going to do? I go, you're going to withdraw and you're going to feel horrible and it's going to be nasty, but you got to do this, because otherwise I think you're going to start using again. And so she agreed. And so we did the procedure. Stephanie got on an airplane on a red eye to New York. By the time we got at JFK, we had 55 text messages and about 30 phone calls, all with a lot of 4-letter words and exclamation points about, I can't stand this, I'm blah, blah. So she had 3 or 4 days of precipitated withdrawal. That's when the naltrexone kicks off the opiates, and it accelerates the withdrawal of all those horrible symptoms. It accelerates it quickly. It makes them feel like they're going to die, but they don't die from that. They die from overdose. And so she had to go to the ER and get hydration, some IVs, finally got through it. And about 6-7 days after that, she finally said, well, my withdrawals are done. And now that naltrexone made it so she knew she couldn't get high. And believe it or not, within about 10 to 14 days, she said, William, I used to spend every waking moment about when I could use next and how I couldn't live without it. Now it's the most disgusting thought and the disgusting substance on the planet.
After 2 weeks?
Yeah. And so that's when I knew that she had a chance. We did that pellet, lasted for about 4 to 6 months. And we did another one.
4 to 6 months. That's a long time.
Yeah. And then some of her previous involvement with the police caught up with her, and she had to spend 9 months in jail.
Okay.
And I left an interesting part of the story is, in the meantime, she had a baby. So a little beautiful boy who's just the love of our life. He's turning 6.
Oh my goodness.
And luckily, she was sober on the naltrexone when she got pregnant with him. And so he's smart as a whip. He has no
Healthy.
problem. He had no opiate influence during the pregnancy in utero. And it was,
That is a miracle.
I know.
That
And
is a miracle.
that's also part of the reason why she's sober, is because she was raised in a family with good parents, and she
Yeah.
knew the responsibility and the importance of having parents. Her the father of our grandson was also a heroin addict, and he has been through his throes of recovery. And now in just the last 2 years, he's done really well, and he's now back in the son's life, and it's phenomenal. It's
That's
a
such a happy
so
story.
so for everybody out there thinking your story, your situation is
Hopeless.
horrible and will never get better, you have to hang on to hope. You have to do whatever you can do without enabling. And the
Mhm.
importance of maintaining the communication and just saying, okay, we can meet, and we can have a cup of coffee, or we can meet, but not in house,
In
outside
the
of,
house.
somewhere else. And now the reason why you do that is when they are finally ready, then you can help them, because they're gonna need help.
Yeah, yeah,
But the help that you're doing is for a detox and rehab. It's for doctor's
right.
appointments, but it's not for giving them money for gas, food, housing, cell
That's very
phone,
practical.
car.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. I know you got to run, and I want to make sure that people can reach out to you, because I know you're doing amazing work with people who are trying to quit. I mean, you've dedicated your life to helping people with these kinds of issues. How do people get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of us on our website, which is www.explorehealthaz.com. So EXPLOREHEALTHAZ.com. And then also you can reach our by phone 602-692-4626. And then there's also 150 some episodes of our podcast, and it's called Your Road to Personal Addiction Recovery. That's on iTunes, Spotify, Star Worldwide Network is the producer. So
Yeah, I was on your podcast, so I need to, yeah, definitely share your
yeah,
podcast, and I'll put all of this in the show notes in case
yeah.
somebody's driving or can't write this down. I'll make sure that
You know, the thing that I want to emphasize is, for if you're not that familiar with the opiates, the most important thing is harm prevention. Is
yeah,
you can do something about that today. You can prevent your child from overdosing and dying today. I think even now in most states in the pharmacy, you don't need a prescription. You can just go and get the Narcan. In Arizona, you can get it for free. If you're in
wow,
Arizona, contact us and we can we have 50 kits that we can provide to people for free, teach you how to
50
use it.
kids. That's
And then
all. Thank you
the
for
other the
providing
other
that.
thing that you want to do is, if they're using IV, you have to make sure they have clean needles, because if they're not, they're going to get HIV or they're going to get Hep C. So that's another prevention, harm prevention.
Harm reduction. Yeah.
Yeah, for a while, before fentanyl became so popular, people didn't know that it was in their drugs. So it could be in heroin, it could be in their Perk 30s, which is a fake Percocet 30. They call it a Mexican blue, and
Mhm.
those are here in Arizona. People usually smoke those, or they pop those. But if you're not familiar and don't know that fentanyl's in there, that's the thing that's causing so many overdoses, because it's 100 times more potent than morphine. You
Whoa.
get just a little bit of fentanyl, and if it's produced in a lab in Mexico, the quality control obviously is bad. And if you're familiar with Breaking Bad,
Mhm.
if you have Walter White preparing your fentanyl pills, you're probably okay. But if Jesse or one of the other guys that doesn't know what they're doing, you could get 10 pills, and 9 of them have 10% of the fentanyl, and the other one has 90%. So you can die with the one pill. We've had 2 people that have passed away in the last year, both of whom were in recovery, were doing well, and life happened and they stressed out, and then they went out and got some fentanyl. One of them died on one pill.
On one pill.
Yeah, so it's
That is so
tragic.
sad.
6 people are dying a day in Arizona from overdose. So it's massive. And I think it's increased during COVID.
Oh, for
So,
sure. Yeah. People
so,
are
so
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 isolated.
the things you can do as a parent, make sure you have a Narcan shot. Make
Okay.
sure that, it's hard to say, oh, I'm going to get them free needles. Make sure that they know how to get their free needles, but let your kid do the work. I think
Okay.
sometimes it's people like, oh, I buy these Narcan. No, tell them where to do and have them do it.
Okay.
And then also, you know, so you do that, and that's just to until they're ready to get
Keep
well.
them alive.
Yeah. And then one of the things I think is really important, if your child is complaining to you, instead of going in and fixing the problem, like, oh, I'm going to fix that. That's something that Mike Speakman told me. He says, okay. He goes, I have 3 things I can do in response to your complaining. 1, I can listen and have a compassionate ear and listen.
Listen with
The,
compassion.
second thing I can do, I can offer you advice if you're willing to listen. Or
Mhm.
the third thing is, if you're asking me for help, I will help you under, the right circumstances. So sometimes instead of going in and trying to fix the problem, which we want to do as parents, if you ask them that, you're going to probably have a much better relationship, and you're just changing how you interact with them will improve.
That is beautiful. What a great
Then
way to.
when they are ready, and they are ready to do it, it's difficult, but they may need your help financially, and that's when you help them.
When
If
they're
they don't
ready.
have enough money to do a detox program, or they don't have enough money to meet with a doctor, the 3 things they do without opiate, one is the acute withdrawal. That's the one that they're so afraid of, but that one only lasts a week at tops. If it's a fentanyl or heroin or Percocets, it's a week. If it's buprenorphine or Suboxone, it's probably 10 days to 2 weeks. And then if they're on methadone, that's the difficult one. Most people can't wean off that for a couple months. It's because the half-life is so long. So
Okay.
once you get through that acute withdrawal, now, and they can produce clean urine, now you can either use a Vivitrol shot, which prevents them from using, it takes away the cravings, or what I do is that naltrexone pellet that for 4 to 6 months, they're not going to be able to use it, it takes away the cravings. It's going to be a safeguard against their relapse and dying, and allowing them to do what I think is more than 50% of what it takes for recovery. And that's the stuff that you're an expert in. It's like how to create your self-esteem. How do you have a sober life? And people make the false assumption that when they work with me, it works. I think it works almost too well, that they can't use and they don't have cravings, and they just think this is great.
And they think
I'm
it's over.
sure
That's just the
I
beginning.
kicked it, but they didn't kick it. It just because it's not an option, because they don't have a craving and they know they can't get high. That's the important time. They got to go in and do the work.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I know what I do is way less than 50%. But you just know that if you don't address the things like in the support with someone like you, I don't think they're going to get well. I think it's just like getting an MBA. When you get a master's of business, it takes 2 years. And for people to become sober off opiates, it takes 2 years of graduate level work to create your life, to create coping skills, to develop your self-esteem, to get rid of your shitty friends, to learn what to do when life presents itself, that using heroin, Percocet, fentanyl is not an option, because the next one, you're gonna die one of these days.
Mm-hmm.
So and
Yeah.
that's kind of I don't want to leave on a bad note, but the story of our daughter is a miracle.
It is.
She's the love of our life. She
Yeah.
gave us this amazing grandkid, and she's a success story. When sometimes she and I will go out and give talks, and people at first are excited about hearing what I do and how I can help people in recovery.
Yeah.
But as soon as I introduce Lauren and give her story, she's a rock star.
Mm-hmm.
People are waiting in line to talk to her and touch her and give her a hug.
We have to get her on the podcast then.
Yeah, I was interviewed by Time Magazine a year or two ago, and we have
That.
in a special edition Time Magazine on addiction, the science of addiction. there's a 4-page article about my interaction with Lauren and her recovery. So it's still out there. You can get it on Amazon. It's Time Magazine, The Science of Addiction, really well done. It's a great episode or edition, including the stuff about Lauren and myself, but also other really helpful things. Time Magazine does a really nice job.
That is huge. That is huge. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Listen, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy day. I know you're just doing amazing work. You're one of the warriors on the streets trying to do your part. And I know you're so humble. On our last conversation, you were like, oh, I only do a little bit. I mean, what you're doing is so important, even just educating the family members of, enabling versus helping. We don't know, right? It goes, how to deal with an addict goes against everything.
It does.
All our instincts. Family members as well as addicts. So thank you so much for your time. We'll have to do another round, and I would love to meet Lauren too.
I so appreciate you. I so appreciate what you do. And I have sent people your way, and I hope it's my challenge of not being codependent doctor, because if I could just reach inside their brain and flip the switch to get them to make a decision about to be sober, and then following through with you, I know we'd be helping even more people, but we can't do that.
Well, we'll do what we can, and we'll help those who are ready, because I agree with you. Unless they're ready, we can't help. But if they're ready, game on.
Game on, yeah.
Game on, brother.
What's interesting too is we love our patients. Stephanie is the person that answers the phone and talks with the patients, or oftentimes the parents. She can connect with people on a level that most people can't. We care. We have.
It's so evident that you guys care.
It's a passion, because without having learned this and helped our daughter, she would not be around. And so if we can help anybody out there, please call us. We'll jump through hoops. We'll do whatever and help educate you about how you can not lose hope. There's always something you can do, and we'd love to help if we could.
Well, I will definitely leave all your information where people can find it. And thank you so much for your time today. And hopefully we'll get to talk again real soon.
Yeah, we're going to have you on ours again, because you and I didn't finish.
I know. This is like the second hour, and we just barely scratched the surface.
Okay. Thanks so much, Arlena.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.